Capricorn, tonight's moon is not asking you to chase what you lost. It may be asking you to finally release it, and what happens next could change the way you see your entire path. If you're a Capricorn, stay with me until the end, because tonight's energy carries a powerful message about closure, intuition, relationships, and the next chapter of your life. Something may be shifting quietly before you can see it clearly. Opening Capricorn, pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Tonight is not just another night. There are moments when the emotional atmosphere around us feels different. Quieter, deeper, almost impossible to explain. And for Capricorn, August 17th carries that kind of feeling. You may have noticed recently that something inside you has been changing. Perhaps you are less interested in explaining yourself. Perhaps you are becoming tired of chasing answers from people who refuse to give them. Maybe you have been thinking about a decision you made months ago, a relationship that changed you, a dream you temporarily abandoned, or a future that no longer looks the way you once imagined. Tonight's moon can be used as a symbolic moment of reflection, not because the moon magically controls every event in your life, but because lunar cycles have long been associated with emotional awareness, endings, beginnings, and inner reflection. And Capricorn, this message is especially important. You do not need to have everything figured out tonight. You only need to recognize what your intuition has been trying to tell you, because sometimes the biggest spiritual shift does not begin with an external event. It begins with a quiet decision inside your own heart, a decision to stop forcing, a decision to stop begging for clarity, a decision to stop returning to the same emotional place, hoping that this time it will finally feel different. Tonight, we are going to explore what this moon may symbolically represent for Capricorn, and why the next chapter may require you to release something before you can fully receive something new. The moon is asking you to slow down, Capricorn. Your natural instinct is often to keep moving. When something goes wrong, you look for a solution. When life becomes uncertain, you make a plan. When emotions become overwhelming, you may try to become even more productive. But tonight carries a different lesson. Slow down. You don't always have to solve the emotional problem immediately. Sometimes you need to sit with a feeling long enough to understand why it appeared. Think about what has been occupying your mind lately. Is there one person you keep thinking about? One decision you keep replaying? One situation where you keep asking, what if I had done something differently? The moon becomes a beautiful symbol here because it does not demand attention through noise. It simply reflects light in the darkness. And that may be your message tonight. You don't need to create more noise. You need to see what is already there. Perhaps you've been distracting yourself from an uncomfortable truth. Perhaps you already know what needs to change, but accepting it emotionally has been harder than understanding it logically. Capricorn, your mind may already know the answer. Your heart may simply need more time to catch up. So tonight, don't force a conclusion. Observe yourself. Notice what brings peace. Notice what creates tension. Notice which thoughts feel heavy and which ones feel strangely freeing. Those differences can reveal a lot about where your energy is actually going. A hidden emotional truth may become clear. One of the strongest themes for Capricorn tonight is emotional clarity. Not necessarily a dramatic revelation, not necessarily someone suddenly calling you with an explanation. Sometimes clarity arrives in a much quieter form. You simply stop making excuses for something that has been hurting you. You suddenly understand why you kept returning to a certain situation. You recognize that you were not missing the person as much as you were missing the version of yourself you were when you were with them. That realization can be powerful, because Capricorn, closure does not always come from another person. Sometimes closure comes from finally understanding yourself. Maybe you were waiting for someone to apologize. Maybe you were waiting for someone to recognize your value. Maybe you were waiting for circumstances to become perfect before you allowed yourself to move forward. Tonight reminds you that your peace cannot always depend on someone else's decision. You can choose peace before you receive an explanation. You can choose yourself before someone else chooses you. And you can begin a new chapter before every question from the previous chapter has been answered. That is a major emotional shift. The relationship message for Capricorn. Now let's talk about relationships, because this is where tonight's message may feel especially personal. Capricorn, if you are currently thinking about someone from your past, don't automatically assume that thinking about them means they are coming back. Sometimes a person returns to your thoughts because your mind is processing an unfinished emotional experience. And there is a difference. The real question is not, will they come back? The deeper question is, if they came back exactly as they were before, would I still want the same relationship? That question can change everything, because sometimes we don't miss reality. We miss potential. We miss what we hoped someone would become. We miss the future we imagined. And tonight, Capricorn, you may be asked to separate the fantasy from the facts. If someone consistently brought confusion, inconsistency, emotional distance, or uncertainty into your life, don't romanticize the pain simply because the memories were beautiful sometimes. Healthy love should not require you to constantly decode where you stand. And if someone is meant to be part of your future, you should not have to destroy your self-respect to keep them there. Tonight is not about chasing love. It is about becoming available for a healthier version of it. Your intuition may become louder. Capricorn, another theme to watch tonight is intuition. You may suddenly get a strong feeling about something. You may wake up remembering a dream. You may notice a thought returning again and again. You may feel unusually drawn toward one particular decision. Treat these experiences as invitations to reflect, not as guaranteed supernatural predictions. Your intuition is often connected to patterns your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. Your brain notices things. Your emotions notice things. Your body notices things. And sometimes all of those signals come together as a feeling that says, something isn't right, or this feels different. Tonight, instead of immediately dismissing that feeling, ask yourself why it might be there. What have you been ignoring? What have you been minimizing? What truth have you been postponing? Capricorn, your intuition does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And when life becomes too loud, you can miss the whisper. That is why slowing down matters. The career and money shift. Now let's move into career, money, and ambition. Capricorn energy is strongly associated with discipline, responsibility, structure, and long-term goals. You understand better than most people that meaningful results rarely happen overnight, but tonight's message is not simply work harder, it is work smarter and more intentionally. You may be entering a period where you start questioning whether the goal you're pursuing is actually yours. Maybe you achieved something you once wanted and still felt empty. Maybe you've been working toward a particular version of success because other people told you that it was success. Maybe you are exhausted from constantly proving yourself. Tonight can symbolize a shift from external validation toward internal alignment. Ask yourself, if nobody could see my achievements, what would I still want to accomplish? If nobody applauded me, what would still matter? If money were not the only measure, what kind of life would actually feel successful? These questions don't mean you should abandon your responsibilities. They mean you should make sure your responsibilities are supporting the life you actually want. Capricorn, ambition is powerful, but ambition without meaning eventually becomes exhaustion. Your next chapter needs both discipline and purpose. Something you have outgrown. There is another message I want you to hear tonight. You may have outgrown something without realizing it. It could be a friendship, a relationship, a routine, a belief about yourself, a career identity, or even an old version of your personality that was built around survival. Sometimes growth feels like loneliness because the people and environments that once felt familiar no longer feel comfortable. That doesn't automatically mean everyone around you is wrong. It simply means you are changing, and change can create emotional distance before it creates emotional peace. Capricorn, don't panic if you feel like you are between versions of yourself. The old identity may no longer fit, but the new identity may not feel completely familiar yet. That middle space can feel confusing, but it is also where transformation happens. You don't need to rush back into an old identity simply because it is familiar. Familiar does not always mean healthy. Comfortable does not always mean aligned, and loneliness does not always mean you made the wrong decision. Sometimes loneliness is simply the silence that appears when you stop abandoning yourself to keep other people comfortable. The release you have been avoiding, Capricorn. Ask yourself one powerful question tonight. What am I still holding on to because I am afraid of what happens after I let go? Maybe you are holding on to a person. Maybe you are holding on to anger. Maybe you are holding on to guilt. Maybe you are holding on to an old dream. Maybe you are holding on to the need to prove someone wrong. And sometimes the hardest thing to release is not the person or situation itself. It is the story we created around it. The story that says one day they will understand. The story that says one day everything will make sense. The story that says I will finally feel valuable when I achieve this. Tonight you can begin writing a different story, one where your worth is not dependent on being chosen, one where your future is not controlled by your past, one where you don't need to understand every detail before taking the next step. Release does not mean you don't care. Release means you stop allowing the past to control your present. 8. A new timeline of choices. Your life changes through choices, not always through dramatic moments, sometimes through tiny decisions repeated consistently. You decide not to send the message. You decide to protect your morning. You decide to stop checking someone's profile. You decide to apply for the opportunity. You decide to say no without explaining yourself for 20 minutes. You decide to save money instead of spending emotionally. You decide to sleep instead of overthinking until 3 in the morning. You decide to stop negotiating with the part of you that wants to return to what already hurt you. These small choices create a different future. So when people talk about a new timeline, remember that you can interpret that spiritually or symbolically. A new timeline can simply mean a new pattern of choices, and Capricorn, tonight may be the perfect moment to identify one pattern you are ready to change. The unexpected blessing of detachment. One of the most underrated forms of power is detachment. Detachment does not mean becoming cold. It means caring without losing yourself. It means loving without abandoning your boundaries. It means wanting something without believing that your happiness depends on getting it. Capricorn, when you become emotionally detached from a specific outcome, you create space for possibilities you could not see before. You stop obsessing over one door, and suddenly you notice another door. You stop trying to control one person's opinion, and suddenly you hear your own opinion more clearly. You stop asking, "Why didn't this work?" and you start asking, "What is this experience teaching me?" That shift is powerful, because your energy moves from resistance into growth. Tonight, don't force the future. Let it reveal itself one step at a time. The message about your future. Capricorn, your future does not need to look like your past. Read that again in your mind. Your future does not need to look like your past. If you experienced rejection, that does not mean rejection is your destiny. If you experience betrayal, that does not mean everyone will betray you. If one opportunity failed, that does not mean you are incapable of success. If one relationship ended, that does not mean love is over. Your past gives you information. It does not have to become your identity. Tonight's moon can symbolize a transition between what was and what is becoming. And perhaps your biggest spiritual lesson right now is patience. You don't have to see the entire staircase. You only need to recognize the next step. Maybe the next step is healing. Maybe it is discipline. Maybe it is a difficult conversation. Maybe it is walking away. Maybe it is finally beginning something you've postponed for years. Whatever it is, don't underestimate the power of one honest decision. Tonight's Capricorn reflection. Before we close, I want you to take a moment for yourself. Put your phone down for a few seconds if you can. Take one slow breath and ask yourself these 5 questions. Number 1. What am I ready to stop forcing? Number 2, what truth have I already sensed but avoided accepting? Number 3, what relationship, habit, or belief is taking more energy than it gives back? Number 4, what part of my future am I afraid to believe in? And number 5, if I truly trusted myself, what would I do next? Don't rush to answer. Let the questions sit with you, because sometimes the answer you need does not arrive as a sentence. It arrives as relief. It arrives as a sudden realization. It arrives as the feeling that you finally understand why something had to end. And sometimes the answer is simply this: I am ready to choose myself. Capricorn, tonight is not about predicting exactly what will happen tomorrow. It is about recognizing what is happening inside you today. You may be standing closer to a new chapter than you realize, but before something new can fully enter your life, you may need to create space for it. So release the pressure to know everything. Release the need to control every outcome. Release the belief that your worth depends on someone else's approval. And release the fear that letting go means losing. Sometimes letting go is how you finally make room for what actually belongs in your life. If tonight feels emotional, don't judge yourself for it. If you feel hopeful, allow yourself to feel hopeful. If you feel uncertain, remember that uncertainty does not mean you are lost. You are allowed to evolve. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to choose a different future. And most importantly, Capricorn, you are allowed to become someone your past could never have imagined. If this message connected with you, comment "I am ready" below. Let that be your personal statement that you are ready to release what no longer belongs in your life and move forward with greater clarity. And if you're a Capricorn, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because we have more spiritual astrology messages coming for you. Before you leave, share this video with another Capricorn who may need to hear this message tonight. And remember one final thing. You don't have to know exactly where your path is leading. Sometimes you only need enough courage to take the next step. Good night, Capricorn. Trust yourself, protect your peace, and let the next chapter unfold.